Once you get started, I'll stop the screen share.
Okay. I think JoAnn's coming in straight up at 150.
Perfect.
Hmm.
What's in the drink?
Huh? Oh,
What's
water.
in the drink? Oh, okay.
With water. Until after the common hour.
Uh,
Yeah,
the post-common hour food chat.
exactly. Yeah, they post, Fred and G post themselves cooking all the time.
Oh, I know. It's been great.
Yeah.
I've been talking to G. Well, talked to G last Friday evening with a opera director friend of ours who
Nice.
is going to direct my opera and has directed her opera. So we found like our, common friends group, and we're talking about where to get groceries in the New York City area.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I learned of this like square block of Japanese grocery, I guess, place called Mitsuwa. So
Okay.
now I can't get. I want to go there soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Stephanie Tinkler says she wants to come eat at your house.
Yes, you're most welcome. Oh, I got a new walk station yesterday. So
What do you mean by
excited about that.
walk station?
It's outdoor, so it's gonna burn a lot of BTUs.
Okay.
I can't do it indoors because you'll burn down your kitchen.
There's that. Yeah.
There's that. So basically, it's a jet engine that cooks food. And I haven't tried it yet because it was raining yesterday, but if it's good today, I could probably try that. So we'll see.
Cool. Are you doing much cooking, Pete?
Yeah, I'm still doing some. I mean, that's one of the few advantages of life these days is more time at home.
Yeah.
And we're not really going out to restaurants, so
Right.
unless they have really good outdoor seating.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Oh man. Let's see what we got. So everybody who's here early, remember to post your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll get to you. We can make you temporarily a panelist to ask your questions. I'm hoping my dog doesn't attack me during this common hour. I just taught a class at 11:30, and she was determined to play tug of war while I was talking about the structure of American orchestras. So hopefully I will be spared that over the next 50 minutes. But she's very unpredictable, so I may not.
I don't think I've been in a meeting where pets' appearances have been not welcomed yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it breaks the monotony of my giant floating head.
Yeah. I feel like I should have my pet sourdough starter on the table for when people talk about their pets. And I'm like, well, here's my pet.
Oh. Okay, I've got 151.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if JoAnn sent me a message or anything. So I didn't know this until we started this process, but our first guests Zoom each other all the time. Apparently, Fred and G Zoom JoAnn and her husband Robert every couple of weeks. They've been doing it throughout the pandemic.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Oh, fun. I guess if they want to continue coming to Zoom us right now, it's cool too.
True.
Zoom parties are a thing now, right?
Yep. Actually, there was a Zoom happy hour for the first couple months of the quarantine. I actually hosted trivia on one of them. Did 3 rounds of essentially pub quiz with about 30 people, which is fun to do.
Which pub quiz do you do?
Well, now I do, when I can, on Tuesday afternoon, there's a guy named Felix Trench, who is an English comedian and actor who hosts pub quiz online. But I hosted trivia for a number of years myself at a place in Delaware. And so I've got this whole backlog of thousands of questions, you know. I mean, I don't reuse all the questions about Delaware, but, you know, if anybody wants to play Delaware trivia, I'm your man.
Cool.
Yeah, but I haven't played here in real life since I wasn't doing it before the pandemic, but now I sort of want to.
Yeah, I've been doing on and off trivia with Geeks Who Drink.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Mark, could you promote JD to a panelist?
I can if I can.
Thank you.
Find him. Let's see. There he is.
I just did it, Mark. All good.
Okay.
I just did it.
And I made him a co-host. Is it possible that JoAnn is in the? No, JoAnn has a co-host invitation.
How would she have that invitation? Did you share her email address with Franklin
I
College?
sent mine. I forwarded it to her.
Yeah, that wouldn't work because the link is specific to your email address. She would have to log in as you.
So that's what she's trying to do right now. And
I think JoAnn's in the chat as an attendee.
Yep. Maybe that. Should we promote?
okay, yeah, if you can find her before I do. Let's see.
Did that just work?
I think it did.
There she is, JoAnn Falletta, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, JoAnn.
Okay, I think that did it. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, hello.
Oh, I am so happy to see you. I'm sorry, I couldn't get in for some reason.
It's entirely my fault. So I apologize to you.
No, that's all right, but you can see and hear me, right?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Now, how can I fix that?
Let's see, mute audio chat.
I only have a way of muting and not. I don't have any way of becoming visible.
Do you have, look on the, down the bottom of the screen where it says video, it should say start video.
Well, I'm going to try open link. I don't see it on the screen. No. Oh, gosh. Launch meeting. I'm going to try again. Launch meeting. Open link. You are already in another meeting. Oh, no. Nope.
Okay.
No, maybe I'd better.
Should I just make her the host? Would that override everything?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think it will enable video by default. She would have to enable the video herself from the start video.
Right.
But I don't see that anywhere. I just see more. Let's see. More. Mute. Audio settings. More.
Leave your, are you in two meetings at once? You can leave the other meeting.
No, I'm going to have to leave this meeting and go in again, maybe. Is that okay? Will I be able to do that?
Don't know.
Yeah, so you can leave this meeting and come back in again.
Let me try that. Maybe, could you send me another invitation? Maybe that would be the safest.
Can I do that, guys?
Yes, it's the same link.
You just send her the link, yes.
Okay.
All right. Let me get out of this meeting then.
Okay. Lordy. And I sent her the same thing I sent to Fred and G last week, and it worked. Thank you all for bearing with us.
I think she's in the attendees now.
Okay. Can somebody find her?
And now she's moved to panelists.
Yes.
Okay. I unmuted, I think, but I still.
You're not muted, but your video isn't there.
I don't know how I can fix that. I brought Robert in to see if he could help me. I don't see anything about video anywhere.
Hi, Robert.
Mark, how are you?
Remember Mark? I just don't see anything about video.
I know, I realize that.
Speaker view, can I do this? Okay, I went into full screen, but I still.
You are now a co-host.
Yes, but a faceless co-host, I think. I can't, oh, wait a minute, start video.
Yes.
I found it.
JoAnn Falletta, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry for the confusion, and I'd like to apologize for the delay.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you too. It's been way too long.
Gosh, it's been too long, really too long. Really.
So let's get going with a formal, I want you to meet our director of our music school, Pete Jutras, who's going to introduce all of us.
Good to meet you. Thanks for your patience.
Well, thanks for dropping by. We're so glad to have you here today. So I just wanted to kind of welcome you and thank you for being here. This is a program we have every week. It's called Common Hour, and we bring the whole school together to talk about things of interest and discuss ideas and share questions. And we're really honored to have such a distinguished guest as yourself here. So welcome, and without further ado, we'll hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of it. And you know, Mark and I are friends from long ago. We've been longtime friends, I should put it that way.
And we started out, it wasn't an adversarial relationship, but I was the music critic.
That's true.
In a community where you were the
conductor. He was a very honest music critic, let me put that to you.
So I have one more bit of a business to introduce you. I want to introduce you with a quote from your own website that I found fascinating. a quote from a review from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which says, "The concert marked the Philadelphia Orchestra debut of JoAnn Falletta, music director of the Buffalo Philharmonic and Virginia Symphony. Her baton, her baton technique is extremely clean and her elbow rhythmically eloquent."
I don't remember that. I have that on my website. I didn't
Yeah.
know
So, ladies and gentlemen, a conductor with a rhythmically eloquent elbow, JoAnn Falletta.
Nice to see everybody, and
Yeah.
nice to be here.
Thanks so much for doing this. So how are you and your husband, Robert, holding up during the pandemic?
Well, it's been a very unusual time. I have not traveled since March. And Mark, I usually travel every single week. So it's been a very different life, but a creative life in some ways, because especially now concentrating on Buffalo, just trying to find ways to keep the music alive and keep in front of our audiences and engage them and most of all, keep paying our musicians and making it a healthy environment for them too. So it's been a challenge, but we're about to start our season, so we're excited. Well, if initially it will be streamed until we can open our hall, but we'll start on September 26th with streamed concerts, small orchestra groups, streamed from the stage. And that's for us a major success. We're coming back together to play. I can't tell you what that feels like. I mean, just amazing.
But what kind of music can you perform if wind instruments spread COVID potentially? Is it all string music, string and percussion, or are you socially distancing the players so you can do bigger ensembles?
We are socially distancing them. It is a small ensemble of around 20. But it's a mixture of strings and winds. For instance, we're doing the Brandenburg No. 3, followed by Stravinsky Dumbarton-Oaks.
Nice.
So it's that kind of thing, adding horns there. We're doing an oboe concerto. We're being cautious, and we have plexiglass panels, and we're socially distancing it from each other. But you know, our hall is a very vibrant hall, and we can hear each other well on the stage. So I think it will work. I mean, we're longing to go back to the big pieces we had planned, but you know, Mark, in a way, it's made me look at this repertoire with new eyes, saying, okay, we never would do Dumbarton Oaks on a season where we have 85 players and we want to use them, and now we have a chance to do Dumbarton Oaks or Stravinsky Pulcinella or things like that, or Ginastera Variaciones Concertantes. All of a sudden, these pieces are fantastically fresh, and for some of our players, they've never played them.
Right. So is there any music that you're returning to personally during the pandemic for either consolation or optimism, or just to give yourself a sense of normal?
Well, I've been doing a lot of listening, trying to find pieces that I don't know that would fit into this smaller size, and there's a lot. I've also had a lot of time to invest in composers of diversity. And that's been thrilling for me, Mark. And I'm especially trying to find women. You know, women as women composers was always a big interest for me since my time with the Women's Philharmonic in San Francisco. So, and there are so many fantastic living women composers, African-American women composers, but women composers from all backgrounds. And so it's given me a lot of exploring time.
So how do you find them, or are you just a magnet for scores?
Oh, well, I think, you know, in pre-COVID times, I was getting 2 or 3 scores a day from composers sending to, and you know, I feel you get a score. I like to look at them. I love to look at them. I'm not going to just put them in a pile and not look at them. So it's a great adventure exploring new music. I wish I had so many more concerts to do, so many pieces on. You know, I don't know if sometimes you probably felt that way too, Mark. You know, so there's so many other pieces you want to do, and they sort of make their way onto the hopeful ones for next season, and you never let go of them really, and you try and fit them into a season as you can.
Sure. So let's switch back to the beginning for you. You started, if I understand this correctly, you started playing the guitar at age 7.
I did. My father was a great music lover, and he loved the classical guitar, and he gave me on my 7th birthday a small classical guitar, and he had arranged for a teacher to come the next day. And that was the beginning for me of my life, I think. You know, I loved that guitar. and I still love my guitar, but I loved that guitar. I loved everything about it. I loved the way the strings felt. I loved the way the woods, the fragrance of the wood. I loved holding it. I loved the open strings. I think for hours I would play just the open strings on that first day.
Sure.
I loved it. And it was my sort of entree into the world of classical music. And I think it was only natural since my parents saw how much I loved music. They started taking my sister and myself to concerts, and that was it. I mean, when I heard the orchestra, it was such an overwhelming experience for me.
So did you decide to become a conductor very early, or at what point did you decide to take it?
Well, I remember the concert. It was in Carnegie Hall. They played Beethoven's Sixth, and I tracked it down. The historian, the Carnegie historian, tracked it down for me. It was a performance by Leopold Stokowski. Wow. I didn't remember who it was, but I did remember that Leopold Stokowski played the Beethoven Sixth. And when it was over, he turned around and said, "Since you loved it so much, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to play the last movement again." And Gino Francescatti said to me, the historian of the Carnegie Hall, said to me, "Yes, that was Leopold Stokowski. That was him. That was him. No one else but him." So it was eye-opening for me. I wanted to be in the middle of that group. Yeah. Now, I don't know why in the middle. I don't know why I didn't think I'd love to learn to play the violin, or I'd love to learn to be in the percussion section or something. No, I wanted to be somehow the person who helped that happen.
Yeah. Now, what would you tell a young musician who may never have considered conducting, who may not think that he or she has the personality for it or the temperament? What advice would you give somebody to urge them in that direction?
Well, I think that they have to be prepared to make it a lifetime study. I think they have to understand that conducting, that's what I love about it, is a kind of a journey that you're on, and you never get to the end of it, and you never know the piece well enough, and you're always learning. You're learning personally, you're learning musically, you're learning in terms of dealing with people. But it's like an endless treasure. You have to be willing to spend a lot of time studying scores. If you don't love to study scores, then it's not for you. But I don't think that there is a single temperament for a conductor. I really don't think so, except perhaps liking people. I mean, because you spend a lot of time in the middle of 85 people or 80 people or more. And but conductors can be themselves and should be themselves in so many ways. I mean, one can be humorous, and that's wonderful. One can be sort of soulful or lofty or kind of businesslike. That works too. I mean, if your main purpose is to bring this music to life, that's going to be what makes it work.
Right. Now, when you work with, I know you work with young conductors, and you're going to Cleveland, right?
Yeah, here I'm going to spend some time with CIM. Great.
Yeah. But when you work with young conductors, what is it about a conductor, a young conductor, that makes you think I can work with her, or I can work with them? Like what sort of training or attitude or capability shows that a young conductor has promise?
I think attitude is what I would look for. And if I can sense that the conductor understands that it's all about the musicians, I know that there's a chance that this conductor can work well. If a conductor is all about what's in his or her head, or all about what she looks like, or all about the impression that the orchestra has of them, it's not going to work. If the conductor realizes that it's about the people around you and that team, and your job is to establish a landscape where excellence can flourish, that's your job. Your job is not to be the boss. I think then that person can do it. Things can be learned, but that attitude, that respect for musicians, that love of musicians, I'll put it that way, that love of that orchestra, of that entity of talent, you have to love it. You have to love it.
Right. I mean, and aside from your own love for music and the desire to do lifelong learning, these things that propel you in part to where you are, what training in particular are you glad you had as you developed?
Oh, individual time with conductors studying scores. That was really critical for me. Sitting down, in my case, mostly with Sixten Ehrling, who was the Detroit Symphony Orchestra conductor for many years, and then was teaching at Juilliard. Sitting down, going through every bar of the score, every bar, every note of every bar. And he had, of course, the experience to tell you what might happen or probably would happen in that bar, the voicing of the chord, what to listen for, what to be aware of, what things might go awry. That kind of attention to detail was very, very helpful.
Nice. Now, there's a photo with you of you and Leonard Bernstein at Juilliard on your website. What did Bernstein teach you?
Bernstein was an amazing force in my life. You know, I guess I would say he's an icon to me. He's a hero to me. And to have had the experience of having him come to Juilliard and teach us was extraordinary. And we learned one main thing. It was probably the most important thing we could ever learn, that conducting is not about how you beat. It's not about how clear you are. It's not about what length baton you use, if you use left hand or right hand. It's all about emotion. It's about human emotion. I remember he was teaching us Carmen. We were working on Carmen, the opera Carmen, with him. And he said to us, you know, you're focusing on, you know, how should I give that downbeat? And it's not about that. He said, unless you're standing on the podium, but you're actually in Seville, and you're feeling the sun beating down on you, and you're sweating, and the crowd is screaming, and you can smell the blood in front of you on the sand, you're in the wrong place. That's what it's about. It's about the emotional content of the music. And then when he would conduct our orchestra, we saw that. We saw him. He went into the world of that music emotionally, and I don't think he ever really worried about technical things that we were struggling with. And he was able to project that vision.
Wow. I'm curious, since you began as a guitarist, like Berlioz of all people.
Yes.
Do you hear an orchestra differently? Is your musical conception different as a result of you being a guitarist as opposed to being a native pianist or something else?
You know, that's a very excellent question, Mark, because I think it has. I think for two reasons. First of all, as a guitarist, as you know, I spent a lot of my time accompanying people, whether it's a voice or flute or oboe or a leading melodic instrument. So you're listening for people breathing, you're watching their body, you're watching their face all the time. You do that when you're a conductor. And I'm not only talking about soloists next to you, I'm talking about in the orchestra. You're watching your principal oboe get ready to play that phrase. So that's a skill that you learn from being an accompanist. But more than that, the guitar is an instrument that cannot sustain phrases. It's like a harpsichord. We do it by hoping or magic or something, or imagination, subterfuge, because the sound dies immediately. So we're always trying to phrase in a way that gets things to be connected. So when I think about phrasing, I think about that ultimate goal. I think about the phrase going, even though on the guitar you are doing it in a sort of way that is not natural. You know, you have to do it that way. So it's made me very aware of the shape of a phrase because of playing the guitar and having to somehow create the illusion of sustaining. And I think that's helped me when you look at a big score. How do you get from the first bar to the last with the architecture that the composer wants, and that idea of where the phrase is going all the time? The trajectory, the impetus is very important to me.
Yeah. Now, you used the word big a second ago, a big score. You have done some outrageously large pieces. You've done
the Virginia Symphony, it's true.
Yeah. You've done the Strauss Alpine Symphony. You've done the Berlioz Requiem.
Yes.
So I've got a two-part question about that sort of thing. How do you pull things that are that large together? And are there any things that large in the future that you want to do that you haven't done yet?
Well, you know, I'd love to do some of those big things a second time. There are some things I did Mahler 8 once. I would love to do it again. I did the Bernstein Mass once and would love to do it again. Berlioz Requiem also. But I think the idea is, you have to take these things in parts. You spend a long time with the chorus in the Berlioz Requiem, working with the chorus. And even when you're studying, I mean, you know the big shape of it, but you're studying all the details of it and seeing them broken down into small parts. And Mark, as you know, it's amazing in some of these, the largest pieces you would imagine, there are so many moments of chamber music. There are so many moments that are very small, and everything comes down to the essence of what it is. And then, of course, it's almost as if the biggest moments are the least problematic. It's those chamber music moments that are difficult. But no, I've had with the Virginia Arts Festival a chance to do the most astonishing works, and I'll always be grateful for that.
So can you talk about what's coming up? I mean, I know everything is so schedules are so hither and yon right now. Everything is sort of unpredictable. Do you have some premieres or recordings set up that you're excited about that are coming up?
In fact, I'm very excited about one that we got in just before the March closure of everything. And that's a CD on Naxos of Florent Schmitt. Not a well-known composer, but a very important French composer. I mean, a really astonishing composer who lived in the time of Debussy and Ravel, and then into many, many years past them. I mean, into the time of Pierre Boulez. So he's celebrating his 150th birthday this year. And we have a CD coming out in November with some of his most beautiful music, including the Salome, the Tragedy of Salome, and a beautiful piece, a Legende, for violin and orchestra. So I'm excited about that because that music has been something, as you know, with Buffalo, we are always looking for unusual composers whom people don't know. And that's been a large part of who we've become. And it's been a large part of our artistic development. And he is a great composer that's not well known.
Are there any other composers off the top of your head who you feel are underrepresented? And they could be even people whose names we might know, who you just think aren't performed enough.
Well, I mean, some of the people that I've been doing, early Bartok, for instance, I think has never performed, and it's some of great Hungarian music. Joseph Suk, Dvorak's son-in-law, tremendous music, early music that's brimming with joy, and then later music that is unbelievably tragic. I mean, these are names that people don't know, and when they discover them, I think that they're astonished. But with that, we have young composers. You know, we have a premiere coming up with a work of Jesse Montgomery in a couple of years. We have Wang Ji Symphony that we would have done this year. We have other premieres that we just have put on hold. Darren Hagen was writing an overture for us. Wonderful pieces that we'll get to. I mean, I think we're not giving up on any of them. We're just pushing them into the future.
Yeah. Now I know I don't want you to feel like you're leaving anybody out, and I know because if you are nothing if not diplomatic. But are there any soloists who you feel particularly close to musically, and why?
Well, there's a violinist that I've worked with that I don't think people know, and I think she's amazing. Her name is Sandy Cameron, and I did a violin concerto by Danny Elfman. Now, Danny Elfman, you know, from
Sure.
Scissorhands and so on, wrote the most astonishing, extraordinarily difficult violin concerto for her, which she plays in a way that is so overwhelming. I mean, she's an incredible violinist. I'm saying her specifically because I mean there's so many incredible violinists. Bela Hristova, also incredible. But these are people who should be on everyone's list to hear. I mean, just great pieces. But this Danny Elfman violin concerto is really extraordinary.
Nice. So let's talk about you as an administrator and a builder of orchestras. You're one of the single busiest people in classical music. I mean, you've got Baltimore. I mean, you've got Buffalo. You've got Norfolk. You're still music advisor at Honolulu, correct?
Yes.
And you're going to begin at Cleveland Institute soon. One of your not in the academic position, but in the orchestral positions, you audition players and you help build the orchestra that way. We have a lot of aspiring orchestral musicians at UGA. What are you looking for when you hear an audition?
Well, unfortunately, auditions are probably the least creative thing that we do. And I have to tell you that sadly, because when we're hearing maybe 100 people for one position behind a screen, we're looking, it sounds so cut and dried, we're looking for accuracy, we're looking for great intonation, we're looking for people who will pay really keen attention to dynamics, rhythm, and all of that. And it's only in the very final stages that we're looking for more individuality. We have a lot of boxes to check off first, and maybe it's not the ideal way to audition for players, but it certainly has shows the depth of talent of people coming out of conservatories. But I would say, if there are people listening that are thinking of a life in the orchestra, I think it's one of the most beautiful things you can do with your life. I mean, the orchestra to me still is an astonishing instrument. It's astonishing. I mean, the variety of repertoire, constantly growing too. I mean, constantly growing, thousands and thousands of pieces. To spend every day of your life in the middle of music with your colleagues, with your artistic family, and to be creative in that way too. I mean, sometimes people think of orchestras as abdicating the responsibility to the conductor, and I say that the opposite is absolutely true. Orchestra is chamber music. Orchestra is the most wonderful example of chamber music, where you're playing and you're listening and your ears are wide open, and you are feeling free. You're feeling free in a frame, but you're still feeling free, and it's a fantastic life. So I just can't say that enough, that what a creative life it can be. And now that we are getting musicians involved in other ways too, Mark, where musicians who are very talented, in so many areas, on committees, helping us choose repertoire, helping us choose soloists, making commercials for us, going out into the public, speaking from the stage, making videos. It's astonishing. It's as if we can tap into their skills and their talents even beyond what they do on the stage.
I'd like to change gears a little bit, and then we'll open it up to student questions. When you were hired, when I was a music critic in Norfolk, you were one of 6 candidates to be music director of the Virginia Symphony. And you were hired there, and it was a very big deal, capital V, capital B, capital D, that you were a woman conductor. And I'm wondering now, 30 years later, if you feel that you are seen in the business just as a conductor, full stop, that it's not as novel anymore, that you don't have to talk about it as much, or do you still feel there's some resistance in the business to a woman conductor?
It's so hard for me to say, and you probably asked me this question or something like it when I first came. I bet, is it different being a woman conductor? It's hard to say. I certainly know that things changed very slowly, Mark. I mean, when I first was hired in Virginia, I think there were many people in the orchestra business that were stunned that the Virginia Symphony hired a woman. And it was more that the Virginia seemed like such a conservative environment, which it isn't, as you know. I mean, Norfolk is not that conservative, and that part of Virginia was probably more open-minded than other places. But I thought it would change quickly, and we'd see women on podiums very soon. And after that, it's taken a long time, but I think it's finally happening now. There are women who are conducting orchestras all over the world.
Nice. There are, and making recordings, and
that's right,
doing all the things that you do. So we're going to open up to student questions. I've got a co-host, Emily Coe, who's been looking at what's in the chat. Do you want to bring some students in?
Yes, I'll bring Emily in. She's, her question also asks something similar to what you just asked, but I would like her to, ask it herself. So here's Emily. I guess it takes a while.
Hello, Emily.
Hello. It looks like I can't start video right now, but that's okay.
That's okay.
No worries. Such an honor to have you here today. I guess I'm asking this question a little bit selfishly because I am also a woman conductor. But I'm wondering if there are ever any moments that you felt tokenized in your career, and how you've responded to that.
Well, I am sure there were. I remember laughing probably with Mark many years ago, saying in initial reviews of my performances, none by Mark, who would never have done this, people talking about what my hair looked like or what I was wearing, and never about the music. And that was fairly common, almost as if they didn't really know how to critique a woman, as if it was something different. So yeah, I think there was some of that. But I think, my idea of my career was to focus on the music always and not be distracted by that. So I never made a point of getting into that. I thought that if change were to happen, it had to happen with people from on the inside doing the best job possible and working hard at music. And I think you probably or have already found the same thing, Emily, if I'm not mistaken, that you just focus on what's at the heart of what we want to do, which is to make music.
Nice. Emily Coe, somebody else?
Yeah, Cindy asked a question, but she had to leave because she had a meeting. So Cindy's...
Not to you're going to say who Cindy is?
Yeah, well, Cindy Johnson-Turner is our wind band conductor and director of the band program here. So Cindy's question is, I'm happy to hear JoAnn is exploring music from underrepresented composers. Are there any of these composers that are standing out? And also, this is similar to another question from a different attendee that says, can you recommend any pieces, any of the pieces you've found? And I think this is directed at underrepresented or, a diversity initiative.
There are a lot of them. Let me just see if I can recommend a couple of one, a woman named Julia Perry, no longer living, African-American woman, fantastic writer for orchestra. Jessie Montgomery, whom you probably know, a lot of people know her name now, and we are just part of a co-commission to have her write a new piece for us. Fantastic music, especially for strings. There are so many others. I'm trying to think. Well, of course, George Walker. People know his name, but his music should be so much more played. As he has a phenomenally moving and emotional piece for strings called "Lyric for Strings." I should really make a list and send it to Mark and have him disseminate it, because there are so many people living now who deserve to be heard so much more.
Sure, send it along. We'll pop it. Someone else?
Yeah, there's an anonymous question, and it's a slightly long one. So here goes. Obviously, there is the composer's ideal of music, and they do their best to represent what that is on the page. And your oral idea of a piece of music, and you rehearse or conduct that idea, but how much does in the moment inspiration play in your conducting during a performance?
Well, that is interesting. I think there's a lot of room for that. As long as and the prerequisite for this is that there's a great deal of trust and understanding between yourself and the orchestra. So you rehearse in some ways. People know your idea of the piece, your plan for the piece. You know how they're playing it. But then in the moment, things do happen. Wonderful things happen. Someone decides to take a little more time on something, or maybe someone gets excited and it moves ahead. All of these things that are the hallmark of live music, and that's what we want. So you have to be quick about that, and people have to be willing to respond to you. I had one very unusual thing happen to me, which shows that this can happen. We were playing a piece by Maestro Penderecki in Poland, but of course we had rehearsed it and played it in Buffalo. And he came to the Polish performance, the performance in Warsaw. And 1 minute before I was going out on stage to conduct it, he said to me, JoAnn, please bear in mind that I like this piece very, very, very slow. We had not done it very, very, very slow. But he was there in the audience. He was going to be there sitting in the seat of honor. I didn't have time to say anything to the orchestra, so we did it very, very, very slow. I mean, there were a few raised eyebrows, I think, in the first 3 or 4 bars, like, what is she doing? but people trusted enough to say, okay, it's going to be quite different this time. And it was, and he was happy. And I explained to a few people what happened afterwards. But if there is that kind of trust, and if there is a feeling like she understands us, we understand her, I think that happens. And that spontaneity is what makes music very special.
Nice.
Thank you, JoAnn. There's another question also from an anonymous attendee. That is, when were you able to start thinking musically and emotionally? Was there a shift from technical music making to artistic music making? And what or who caused this shift, if applicable?
You know, there was a very big shift for me, but it wasn't exactly in that way. I would say the shift happened, and I can't say when it happened. It probably was happening gradually. When I stopped thinking about what I was doing and started thinking only about what the musicians were doing. To the point where if someone asked me, are you conducting this? You know, I got to the end of the piece and asked me, are you doing this in 3 or in 6? I wasn't sure. So that I was no longer focusing on what I was doing, but I was more focusing on how they were responding to it, how they were playing, and how it created a sound that was beautiful. So that shift happens at a certain point, and I always say to conductors, that's really a major step in our development when we realize it's all about the orchestra. It's not about us. It's all about the orchestra. And I hope that every conductor comes to that. I mean, at the beginning, it's very natural for conductors to be thinking, what does the orchestra think of me? Am I doing a good job? Do they like what I'm doing? Do they like me? Is that tempo good? Yeah, that's natural. But at a certain point, it's not about anything you are doing. It's all about how they are able to play and how they are able to play in a relaxed, open, beautiful way. And how can you help that happen? That's the big shift that I found took place slowly over my life.
Interesting.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that. There are lots more questions, so I'm just going to charge on. The next one is also from an anonymous attendee, and it is, would love to hear your thoughts about diversity in orchestras. Should orchestras reflect the demographics of their service areas? And should auditions continue to be blind?
This is a very big question that we're all struggling with. I will tell you that we've had now 3 town meetings with the Buffalo Philharmonic discussing diversity in our orchestra and how we can continue our efforts, because we do an enormous amount of diversity in terms of inviting soloists, inviting guest conductors, inviting singers, doing music by diverse composers. But the one thing that does not reflect what Buffalo is, the community of Buffalo is our orchestra. It doesn't. But so we've talked a lot, the musicians and I have talked a lot, and they've been able to be very frank. And I have to say, to a person, the musicians who've been willing to share publicly their feelings feel so strongly that they want the screen to remain. And it's not at all for feelings of diversity. I mean, our orchestra is quite diverse. I mean, but not specifically with African Americans. We have a lot of Latinx, and we have, of course, many Asians. But it's more from the point of protecting the people who take the auditions. We have, as you can imagine, most orchestras have this, a lot of people that we know taking auditions. Many of them are our substitutes, and we use them all the time when we need an extra violin or we need an extra cello. It's also possible for someone to have a bad day on an audition. And they don't want us to know who they are, and we don't want to know who they are if it's a bad day. You know, it's not something that should figure into how we judge them. So the screen is a protection for them, and it's also a way of making us focus only on what we hear. And that's not again for race. It's for maybe what someone looks like, or if they move or don't move and create an impression. It's for emphasis on excellence. But I realize that means that our orchestras are not reflective of our community. And what we are trying to do is to go further up the stream and try and help people who may not have figured prominently in orchestras get the training, instruments and encouragement they can have as young people, because those young people are going to enter orchestras. I know it. I mean, I spent a lot of my summer, except for this summer, at summer festivals with young people, high school kids. And I see fantastic, diverse kids playing at a high level. I know they're going to get orchestra jobs, but that's because someone helped them when they were younger. That's what we need to do now. We can't overlook that. I mean, it has to start the moment a young child gets an instrument in their hand.
Thank you, JoAnn. Another question. Have you done any composing, arranging, or orchestrating?
I haven't done any composing. Of course, I've done some orchestrating and arranging, but you know, I've always felt from the time I started studying music that the composer was something very sacred in the music world. I mean, that was the person who created something that we all love to play. And so my role is to recreate that and to bring the personality of our orchestra into that voice. So that's why I love to work with living composers, because I love to have them there on the stage with us, talking to us, having us try something different, or making a change here and a little editing here. Then we become part of the creative process. So I love that, but I have too much respect for composers to try it, I think, ever.
Thank you. Next question. Have you found any interesting literature over quarantine regarding music?
I'm trying to think of the last. Oh, yes. I've read a fantastic book about Bartok, his early life. I've got to remember the name of it. It is like required reading, I think. This is extraordinary book on Bartok's early life. I'll run and get it and tell you right again, because I have it right nearby. But I will get back to that.
Thanks, JoAnn. The next question is, as someone who has conducted many different orchestras, how do you go about working with each orchestra and their unique way of playing certain repertoire?
That's the whole wonderful thing about working with different orchestras, is that it has to be their performance. I mean, you want their personality to shine through. A conductor comes to an orchestra with a vision for the piece and a history of how they've done it, but then opens the door to something completely new, something completely different, and you want that to shine through. For instance, I never wanted the Virginia Symphony to sound like the Buffalo Philharmonic or to sound like the Hawaii Symphony, because the people were different, their personalities were different, so it had to be different. I wanted it to be different, and you know, I remember an extreme situation. I was conducting in Stuttgart, and we were doing Tchaikovsky 4, and the first theme of the first movement. I always tend to just think of it in a kind of nervous way, you know, sort of nervous but anxious, you know, moving forward. And it was obvious that they were thinking of it in a kind of mournful way. So I kept conducting, and they kept pulling it back. And at a certain point, I realized that's what that piece was to them. That's how they felt it. So we came up with some sort of compromise where I pushed them a little bit, they pulled me back a little bit. We felt very happy. So I wanted to incorporate their history with that piece. They probably had always played it very slowly, and while they were willing to move a little bit, you know, that was in their DNA. So, you know, that happens, and I think it's good to let orchestras inform what you do as a conductor, and keep your ears open, and I've gotten some fantastic inspiration from that.
Thanks, JoAnn. The next question is from Dev Sweezy, and he's going to ask it, or he or she is going to ask it. So, Dev, you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I can't turn my camera on. So, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and ask it. Hi, my name is Davron Edwards. I'm a conducting student with Dr. Turner. And I wanted to, you was talking earlier about how it was really about the emotional connection between the conductor and the orchestra. What types of things did you do, or have you done, or are you doing to develop that that emotional tool bag, if you will, so that you can convey those emotions with the orchestra?
Well, I think first thing, Dev, is to really feel that. I mean, I feel like I've always felt that the orchestra is the greatest team in the world. I mean, I'm surrounded by astonishing talent. So if you feel that way, I think musicians, if you like them and you respect them, musicians know that. So, and I have a feeling from your voice that you like musicians. I don't know why I think that, but I think that you like musicians, and that might be easy for them to know. There you are. That might be easy for them to know. If they know that you like them, you respect them, you're honored to work with them as a young conductor, that's already a big step forward. Being careful about how you speak to them. Now, of course, as a conductor, you're constantly making comments. My teacher, George Mester, once said to me, never make a negative comment. Like, don't say, don't play so loudly. Instead say, could you play a little bit more softly in that spot? So put it always in the positive. It's a lot easier to be offered a possibility of doing something than to be told you're doing it wrong. Be careful, and you'll get to sense this with your orchestra because it's a mosaic of personalities. There are some people who love to be asked to do some things. Sometimes I felt like the bass section was always like hungry for anyone saying anything to them. They feel like, tell us something, ask us to do something differently. But someone like the principal oboe perhaps is a little more sensitive about a suggestion. So phrase it in a way that again offers possibility. I like to think of myself more as a coach than as a boss. More as why not just think about it this way? Why, if everyone else is playing staccato there, but you have the secondary melody, why don't you play it really legato? So we get that sense of difference between you, just to try something. So again, think of it always in the positive. They want you to say things. They want you to offer your ideas about the piece and to change their ideas, open up their imagination, but not in a critical way, because all musicians are very sensitive, and all musicians want to do their best and feel like the conductor appreciates that they're doing well.
Nice. More questions?
Mark, this is JD, and I'm taking over for Emily now. Okay. And I've got an anonymous question from anonymous attendee asking this following question. When you're coaching a piece of music with a large ensemble, how much do you discuss your vision for the piece, and how much do you rely on your gesture to communicate it?
I think ideally you rely on your gesture to communicate as much as possible. I think orchestras like to hear sometimes an idea or a comment about a piece that they didn't know that will intrigue them and change the way they play it, but they don't like to hear long speeches about what the music means or why the composer wrote this. Just in general, I would say be careful of that. Musicians want to play, and that's whether they're a high school orchestra or whether they're the Philadelphia Orchestra. They want to play. They don't want to listen to a speech. But if you need to say something that cannot be shown in gesture, then you should say it, and you should say it, in a succinct way. So everyone finds their own way of how much they should speak or how little they should speak. But I would always say, be careful not to speak, not to take too much time talking about things that don't have a direct bearing on how they're going to play it.
Thanks, Ms. Falletta. And we've got another question from Zion Park, who is here now with us on the screen. And so Zion, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Hello, my name is Pyonggang. Sorry for different name. That is my daughter's name. Yeah, very nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your great words. As you know, I'm studying with Mr. Sede, and I'm a TMA student. After graduating this school, I also want to work like you. So would you recommend something to start my journey as a professional conductor? How can I do? Or what do I need to prepare for you?
Well, think about, first of all, any kind of subsidiary studying you can do, perhaps in the summer. There are great summer festivals that you might think about. Tanglewood, of course, is one. Aspen is another. But there are many of them that will give you time on the podium with professional orchestras, with some guidance of a teacher. I think that you could take full advantage of that. Otherwise, I would really suggest that wherever you are, if you can get into rehearsals of professional orchestras, whether it's a visiting orchestra or your home orchestra, and get to be there listening to what conductors say to orchestras and how orchestras respond, that's the best training. It's amazing how much you can learn from how they respond to that.
Would I have one more chance to ask you?
Sure.
Yeah, of course, I really want to participate in the camps like Tanglewood or Aspen, something like this. As you know, it's really difficult to join it. I also tried several times, but I cannot be accepted by the camps, the festivals. So would you give me the tips or how can I make or videotapes, or what do I need to do?
Oh, you need videotapes. That's what it is. You need videotapes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. This is a big difficulty. You know, I'm going to tell what we do to help, and maybe there are some other situations that could help with this. We have a situation with the Mannes College of Music, where they are the students at Mannes, the graduate students, are our assistant conductors in Buffalo, in addition to our own assistant conductor. They spend a lot of time in Buffalo conducting the orchestra, and they can video themselves. So they use that videotape for applications. Or it could be, on the other hand, it could be a question of getting a group of your friends together and asking if you could videotape yourself. It wouldn't have to be a large orchestra. It could be something like the Stravinsky Octet, or L'Histoire du Soldat, The Soldier's Tale, or even a Mozart serenade would be possible. So if you could get maybe some friends of yours to agree to play for you and have it videoed, I know that's important. There are some summer camps that you can go to with teachers who will allow you to videotape, and I think many people go to those festivals a lot for those videotapes, which are very, very important, I know.
Right. Thank you.
Next, we've got a member of our theory faculty, Dickie Lee, who has a question.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks for doing this, and thanks for entertaining my question here. So I'm curious, when you're first looking at a score that you haven't seen before, what's your analytical process like for kind of getting into it? Do you look for large formal markers? Do you look for like contrasting sections? Like just in general, what's your process and what kinds of things tend to catch your eye is what I'm curious of.
Oh, thank you, Dickie. That is important. I always tend to work from the big in. And when I was at Mannes, you know, Schenker was the hero at Mannes at that point. So Schenker in traditional music, everything could be reduced from 3-2-1 or 5-4-3-2-1. And as you know, I mean, you know, but that really, and not the specifics of that so much, but that idea stuck with me that the larger form has to make sense first before we get into detail. So, I mean, if you're looking at a symphonic form, at first you read the 3 big sections or the 2 big sections, and then you work in from that. Which themes and where are the themes? And for a conductor, it's very helpful because it helps me see the differences in that this time the second theme, the oboe has the line, but for some reason he gives it to the clarinet in the recap. So all of a sudden details become clear, but my whole idea is start from the largest form. And really the reason for that is we all understand when we play anything that the audience has to be able to follow our story from the beginning to the end. And they can't go back and read the page again. No, they have to be able to be taken on this journey. That's our job. I mean, even as a solo violinist, that's your job to do it. So how can we take them on that journey if we don't really know long, the most basic shape, and then the stops along the way. So that's ideal, but that's how I like to start with it and then work in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Mark, I think we're close to time, but we have one final question that I'll read. It's an anonymous question. In the past century, many orchestras were known for their unique sound, but during this century, some may say that orchestras are starting to sound more similar. What have you noticed from working in front of different orchestras?
Well, there is that, and there is also the reason that we play so much music in American orchestras, really so much music of all types, from Mahler symphonies to Blood, Sweat, and Tears or something. I mean, we play everything. So there's a feeling of, I mean, it's amazing that musicians can do that. I mean, it's just amazing that they can shift like that. But I think what I find is if a music director spends a considerable amount of time with their orchestra, they do develop a sound. Now that sound comes partly from the music director's idea of sound. It comes from their hall. It comes from their colleagues around them. For instance, I inherited in Buffalo an orchestra that plays very far behind the beat, and that's who they are, and it's wonderful. I preserve that. In a sense, as a music director, I almost feel like I'm a steward of who they are, of their sound, taking care of it until somebody else comes and takes care of it, hopefully. So I think the more the time the music director spends with them, really curating what kind of music we do and the variety of music and the sound. And sound is something you don't talk about. I mean, you don't say to an orchestra, I'd like you to play with a beautiful sound. That doesn't do anything. You have to make it possible for them to play with a beautiful sound. So I think that orchestras can develop a sound. I feel that Buffalo has its very unique personality, and partly it comes from the hall that we have. Partly it comes from a kind of European background that the orchestras had. Partly it comes from their almost exuberant personality, which communicates to the audience. Maybe the hall helps that because the hall is very close to our audience. So I think it's great when an orchestra can have their own way of playing things.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for all the answers to these questions.
Mark, can I tell you the Bartok book if you give me 10 seconds?
Sure, absolutely.
Hold on.
Okay.
This is it. The Naked Face of Genius. Bartok in the United States. A fantastic book. I mean, it's quite a read. The Naked Face of Genius by Agatha Fassett, who worked with him closely. So that was a revelation to me.
That's fantastic.
Time in the U.S.
Nice. Love me some Bartok. So.
You remember that was my first piece with the Virginia Symphony, Mark. I think that's the first time you ever reviewed me, probably.
Yeah, I remember you making an appearance before the board and a bunch of supporters who had never met you before.
Yeah.
And you walked in a room and nobody knew what to expect. And because you expect a conductor to have a big, ebullient personality sometimes. And you walked in and said, Bela Bartok. And the room went, you had everybody just from that.
You know how much I love him. I mean, I love his music. So
yeah,
I'm so happy to see you again, Mark.
I
hope we can meet in person at some point.
I would love that. I would love that. Thanks so much again, and thanks to everybody for attending.
Thank you. Thank you all.